Before the potato existed in Europe, before corn crossed the Atlantic, before rice paddies spread west, one single root vegetable kept entire civilizations alive. It did not arrive on a ship from the New World. It was not a luxury traded along the Silk Road. It was already there, buried in the cold ground, waiting for someone hungry enough to pull it up. The turnip, Brassica rapa, is the most underestimated food plant in human history. First domesticated in Central Asia several thousand years ago, where genetic studies confirm the most diverse wild varieties still grow. This unassuming root spread across the ancient world, not because it was desirable, but because it was reliable. It grew where other crops refused. It matured when other harvests had already failed. And for centuries upon centuries, it was the difference between life and death for millions of people who never had the luxury of choosing what to eat. By Roman times, turnips were a critical food source across the empire. Emperor Tiberius accepted part of Germania's tribute to Rome in the form of root vegetables, a detail that tells you everything about how seriously the ancient world took this crop. It was not a garnish, it was currency. Among ancient Jews, the turnip carried a different reputation entirely. It was so associated with poverty that the Talmud declared woe to the house in which the turnip passes. And yet it was eaten fresh, boiled, or ground into meal because there was often nothing else. That tension between contempt and dependence would follow the turnip for the next 2,000 years. People looked down on it while eating it to survive. They mocked it while planting it in every garden. The turnip never asked to be loved. It simply kept showing up when everything else disappeared. From roughly 1500 to 1800, turnips were the staple root vegetable of European village life. 300 years. That number deserves to be said slowly because we tend to compress history into moments when it actually unfolds across generations. The potato did not arrive in Europe until the late 1600s, and it did not become a dominant crop until the mid-1800s. For 3 full centuries before that, the turnip was what stood between millions of ordinary people and starvation. It was the crop planted by farmers who had no margin for error, the vegetable stored in cellars by families who could not afford to lose a single harvest. In a world without refrigeration, without global supply chains, without emergency food aid, the turnip was the emergency plan, and it worked. In England around 1700, a man named Charles Townshend became so closely associated with this vegetable that history remembers him literally as Turnip Townshend. He promoted turnips as a central element of the famous Norfolk 4-course crop rotation: wheat, turnips, barley, and clover. This single innovation is credited with helping trigger the British Agricultural Revolution, one of the most consequential transformations in human history. The turnip enabled year-round livestock feeding because animals could eat turnips through the winter months when pasture was dead and hay supplies ran low. It ended seasonal starvation cycles that had plagued English villages for centuries, and it helped increase the English population from 5.5 million in 1700 to over 9 million by 1801. A humble root vegetable, one people associated with poverty and peasant food, helped reshape the demographic trajectory of an entire nation. That is not a minor footnote. That is a turning point disguised as a side dish. Turnips could be planted as late as fall and still provide food before winter arrived. This made them a lifeline crop for settlers, refugees, and villages facing late-season food insecurity. When your wheat failed in July, you could still scatter turnip seeds in August and have something to eat by October. In the American South during the antebellum era, turnips were a plantation staple precisely because they produced edible greens within weeks of planting. They literally fed enslaved people and frontier settlers when all other crops had failed. The greens grew fast, the roots stored well, and the entire plant could be consumed. In a world defined by scarcity and unpredictability, the turnip offered something almost no other crop could: a second chance. Then came the moment that would forever scar the turnip's reputation. During World War I, the Allied naval blockade cut Germany off from food imports. The potato harvest of 1916 failed because of poor weather, and the German population was forced to survive almost entirely on turnips and rutabagas. They called it Winter, the Turnip Winter of 1916 to 1917. Government rations fell to roughly 1,000 calories per day, barely one-third of what a healthy adult male requires to function. People made turnip bread, turnip coffee, turnip jam, turnip everything, because turnip was all there was. Female mortality increased 30% in 1917 compared to pre-war rates. An estimated 80,000 children died of starvation in Germany in 1916 alone. The turnip became both savior and symbol of suffering. It kept millions of people alive who would have otherwise had absolutely nothing. But it could not replace the full diet that an entire nation needed to sustain itself. To this day, older Germans carry deeply negative associations with rutabagas and turnips because of this period. The memory of that winter passed down through families like a wound that never fully closed. But here is what must be said clearly. The turnip did not fail. The system failed. A single vegetable was asked to do what an entire food supply chain could not, and it still kept millions of people breathing. That is not a mark of shame. That is a testament to an extraordinary plant. Now consider where it grows. Turnips are one of the most shade-tolerant root vegetables in existence. While saying they grow in total shade is a simplification, turnips produce usable roots in heavy partial shade and dappled forest edge conditions where almost no other root crop can survive. They are a cool season crop by nature. Hot temperatures make them woody and bitter, so they naturally prefer the shorter days, lower light, and cooler temperatures of early spring and late fall. They do not compete for the prime garden real estate that tomatoes and peppers demand. They thrive in the margins, the neglected corners, the spots where the sun barely reaches. Turnip greens, the leaves of the plant, are actually more nutritious than the root itself and grow vigorously in low-light conditions. A 100-gram serving of cooked turnip greens provides 307% of the daily value of vitamin K, 42% of vitamin A, 30% of vitamin C, and 30% of folate. These are not modest numbers. These are the nutritional figures of a superfood hiding in plain sight beneath a reputation problem. The speed at which turnips grow is almost difficult to believe. They have a 55 to 60-day seed to harvest cycle, among the fastest of any root vegetable on Earth. You can plant a turnip seed and pull a usable root from the ground in less than 2 months. In a crisis, that timeline is everything. Turnips are also deep-rooted plants, pulling nutrients from soil layers that shallow-rooted crops like lettuce or carrots simply cannot reach. This is precisely why they were so central to the Norfolk rotation. They did not just fill a gap in the planting calendar. They actually improved the soil for the next crop that followed. The turnip was not just food, it was infrastructure. They grow in poor, marginal soils where potatoes and carrots would fail completely. And they cost, in the most meaningful sense, nothing. Turnips are open-pollinated, meaning you can save seeds year after year with no need ever to purchase new seed. A single turnip left to bolt in its second year produces thousands of seeds, enough to plant an entire village garden from one forgotten plant. They require no fertilizer because they were literally the fertilizer crop in traditional rotation systems. They require no special tools. Broadcast sowing, the simple act of scattering seeds across harrowed ground, was the historical planting method used for centuries across Europe. They can be stored in the ground through winter in mild climates, needing no root cellar at all. In cold climates, they keep for months in any cool, dark space. The entire plant is edible. The root, the greens, and even the flower shoots, which taste similar to rapini or broccoli rabi, vegetables to which the turnip is closely related. In the Austrian region of Wildschönau, farmers have been making Krautinger schnapps from turnips since Empress Maria Theresia granted them permission in the 18th century, a tradition that is still alive today. One crop: food, drink, medicine, animal feed, soil amendment, and seed stock for the following year. all from a single plant that asks for almost nothing in return. The nutritional profile of the turnip deserves to be stated without exaggeration because the plain facts are impressive enough. Turnip root, boiled at 100 grams, contains just 22 calories, is 94% water, and provides 14% of the daily value of vitamin C. It is not calorie-dense, which is exactly why the potato eventually displaced it. But turnip greens are where the real power lies. 100 grams of boiled greens contain 20 calories but deliver 368 micrograms of vitamin K, 381 micrograms of vitamin A, 118 micrograms of folate, 8,440 micrograms of lutein, a major compound for eye health, and 137 milligrams of calcium. Turnips belong to the cruciferous vegetable family, alongside broccoli, kale, and cabbage, and they contain glucosinolates, compounds that have been extensively studied for their anti-cancer properties. In the southeastern United States, turnip greens remain a traditional side dish, boiled low and slow with salt pork, the rich broth called pot liquor, and served alongside cornbread. It is one of the oldest food traditions in America, and it persists because it works. So why did we forget the turnip? The answer is painfully simple. The potato arrived in Europe in the late 1500s and eventually displaced the turnip as the primary root crop because potatoes yield roughly 3 times the calories per acre. In a world that increasingly measured agricultural success by sheer caloric output, the turnip could not compete. It became associated with poverty, with animal feed, with wartime deprivation. The German turnip winter cemented its image as a food of last resort rather than a food of first choice. Modern agriculture, built on monocultures and high calorie per acre calculations, had no room for a modest root that excelled at resilience rather than raw volume. But the world is changing. In an era of climate instability, of shade gardening and food forests and permaculture, of communities building resilience into their food systems rather than chasing maximum yield, the turnip is arguably the single most important vegetable we have collectively forgotten. It did not just feed villages for 300 years. It enabled the British agricultural revolution. It kept nations alive through world wars. It grows where almost nothing else will. It costs nothing to plant, nothing to maintain, and nothing to save for next year. If you have a shady corner of your yard where nothing seems to grow, plant turnips. In 60 days, you will understand why entire civilizations survived on this one humble root.